Who enjoys seeing something different on the stage other than me? Yes. It's good to see artwork and lovely ladies on the stage painting. So, Dens, what are you doing? Can I give you the microphone, or am I pushing the friendship a bit? Do you want me to do it? Or okay, it says, Jesus, you make the darkness tremble. Fantastic. Sage, what are you painting? No. She's painting washing the feet, and is this a representation of anything particular for you? Or you just felt to paint this? You just felt to paint this? Yeah, fantastic. How many know there's not just one way to worship, but there's multiple ways of worshiping? And we focus on, especially when we come corporately as a church, on one or two ways of worshiping, engaging with God, but there's multiple ways. Some people dance, some people wave flags, some people scream and shout, some people lie on the floor, other people paint, some people like silence. Like, there's not just one way of connecting with God and experiencing God and loving on God and worshiping God. There's multiple ways. So that's why we've got Dens up here as well as Sage painting what they felt God ultimately pressed on their heart to paint for us. So I'm looking forward to seeing the end result of this and seeing what it looks like. I believe it would be good. Sage has just been away at a conference in Marupna painting for the entire weekend. She sent me a photo, because I've been away as well, of all the artworks that she did there, and they looked absolutely incredible and amazing. But so, moving on. So does anyone know what today is? Thank you. All right. There's funny people here. Today's Sunday. This sign at the back says, love built this. Can we say that together? Again? Fantastic. So for the last 3 weeks, this is week 4, we've been going through a series called Love Built This, with the idea that we've been looking at and trying to engage with, or at least ask the question of what is building us. This, in my mind, we want to be built by something. We want to know what's building us. If I bought bare vacant land that was coming with a house, but the house was yet to be built, but I've paid for the house, I kind of want to know what the house is going to look like. I want to see what the blueprints look like, so I know what I'm actually buying. And the truth is this, that I think it's the same thing with our lives, in that we get to connect with, engage with different things that are building us, whether it be God, whether it be jealousy, whether it be frustration, whether it be hate, whether it be anger, whether it be irritations, whether it's offense, whether it's whatever it is. We allow certain things to build us, and depending on what it is that we're allowing to build us will determine what we end up. One of the examples I used a few weeks ago is, has anyone encountered or met that really old person who's just angry and bitter? Anyone met that person? Yeah. Anyone met that really old person and just filled with grace and love? How many know that those two different people allowed something different to build them? Can we turn the lights on, please? Those two different people allowed something different to come in and build them. One was anger, one was frustration, one was jealousy, one was offense perhaps, and the other was love. And so what we want to be as Christians, we want to be allowing love to build us. We want to be allowing Jesus to build us. And if Jesus is building us, then I think we end up becoming more Christ-like at the end of our lives. And the hope would be that today we're more Christ-like and tomorrow we are. But the hope would be at the end of our lives, we look like that old person that's filled with grace, with love, with mercy, with forgiveness, with reconciliation, with all these things. And so my hope is, for me, I'm by no means perfect. And if you've been sitting through this series, you have probably realized that I've at least tried to be extremely transparent with some of my struggles with just being a human being. That I hope that tomorrow I look more Christ-like, that I'm allowing Christ to build more into me, that I'm allowing love to build me more and more and more. And so that's the premise of what this series has been. So the first week was this: love builds bridges, and that love doesn't want you to remain where you are. We all get wounded, we all get hurt, we all have issues as far as people hurt us. Not necessarily physically, but emotionally. They leave us scarred, they leave us bruised. And when that happens, we've got a choice to either stay where we are, or love wants to build a bridge so that you can keep moving forward into the future that God has got in store for you. But when that hurt turns up, you've got a choice to sink your roots and remain where you are or move forward. Week 2 was love reconciles ultimately. And so what we looked at with there is that love is all about focusing on a relationship, focusing on seeing relationships repaired, restored, seeing people built. Love has a focus on oneness, not just singleness, but oneness. Then last week we looked at love discovers. As far as love discovers something specific, love discovers people. Love is interested in discovering who the person is, what's created in them, what God has deposited in their heart. Love seeks to discover that, and a lot of people don't even know what God's placed in there, in themselves, let alone what God's placed in other people. And so love sets out to discover people, and this is the last one, that love builds others. But before we get on to this, I'm going to really quickly go into what we're talking about next week, if we can put the slide up. So next week we're starting another series which it's titled, or the premise is, I can't believe in a God that, or I can't believe in a God who. So next week I'm starting the series and it's this: I can't believe in a God who picked a faulty Bible to communicate with us. The week after that, we've got Lucas and Megan coming. And so the whole series is, I can't believe in a God who, I can't believe in a God that. The idea is this: that we can bring our friends, our family, our co-workers, people on the outskirts. They struggle with Christianity because of, like, everyone knows, everyone has been around, specifically in this age, to know the specific struggles that people have with Christianity and Christians. Like, plenty of people have a huge problem with the Bible because they say it's faulty, it's got this and it's got that in. So I can't believe in a God who picked a faulty Bible to communicate with us. Lucas, when he comes the following week, which is the Queen's birthday weekend, he's talking about this: I can't believe in a God whose followers and leaders are mostly hypocrites. And so that's what he's going to be attacking. The week after that, Adam Mitchell's going to be attacking something different as well. And then the last week, I'll finish again with something different as well. So that's what's happening throughout the month of June. So can I encourage you to bring your friends, bring your family, bring people along, people that are sitting on the outskirts, people that are struggling, people that have questions, people that just don't like Christians and Christianity. Bring them along. So let me pray and then we'll get into it. So, Father, I thank you for the opportunity, the privilege and the blessing that it is to be able to share what it is that I feel that you've placed on my heart to share, Father. Specifically surrounding Love Built, and I've been able to do this over these last 3 weeks, God, and I thank you for what it is that you've deposited on my heart for this week, week 4. And God, I pray that as I share it, Father, you both challenge and inspire and encourage me, Father, as you do with all of us here. And everybody said, amen. Anyone heard of this statement? And this is actually one of my favorite statements that I will use not all the time, but relatively consistently. I do it and it's generally, I've only ever heard people use it in a joking form, but it goes something like this. Say, like, it's the last morsel of dessert. And there's friends and there's family everywhere. It's the last bit of the this is about the only dessert I like. I don't like dessert apart from sticky date pudding. If you want to have me around and cook me dessert, sticky date pudding, I'll be your best friend for the rest of your life, as long as you feed me sticky date pudding with lots of cream. But bear in mind, there's only one sticky date pudding there. No one else gets it but me. You know what I'm talking about? Like, it can be any example that you want, but it's the last morsel of dessert, and you're like, should I ask if anyone else would like this? But then you get up, and normally a statement will follow. Maybe it's only me that makes this statement. And as I'm scooping the sticky date pudding out of the bowl and onto my plate, I'll make a statement like this as everyone's eyeballs are on me. And it's a joke, because everyone else has had a belly full. I'll say self first, self second, and if any left over, self third. Anyone use that statement? Oh, gosh. I'm the only person. All right, so that's a statement that has frequented in my household. And I only ever use it as a joke, and I've heard it used by multiple other people, and it's only ever been used as a joke, but I'm pretty sure that we could find actions that dictate anything but a joke. Would that be correct? Like self first, self second, self third. I never actually set out to meaningly be that way or meaningly act that way or meaningly do that. But I'm pretty sure if I look over the course and the history of my life, I can see plenty of times and plenty of moments where I've only focused on, like, serving myself sticky date pudding, serving myself more of this, serving myself more of that. Like, we've all found throughout life self-serving people. Would that be correct? People that only want to serve themselves, no one else, just themselves. Anyone met that Christian yes, and I'll say Christian because I'm sure we've all met them, and I know the people outside the community have met plenty of them, that they never practice what they preach. They talk big game and how I'm doing this, but they never serve anyone else bar themselves. Only their wants, only their desires, only their purpose. I'll only do what I want to do. I won't do what anyone else wants to do. I won't serve anyone else. Anyone met that person? Anyone met that person that's not a Christian? They're just outside the church. They're just a normal human being, maybe with no belief. Maybe they're agnostic. Maybe they're an atheist. Maybe they're what? Anyone met that they only serve themselves? Or maybe this other person, like, I've met a couple of these, and I imagine more as you get into the business world, you've met that either husband or wife whose career comes well and truly before any family. Family is second fiddle to the career. Who are they serving? They're serving themselves. And isn't this, in the end of the day, the reason why relationships end up falling apart? Isn't this, at the end of the day, why business ventures with people fall apart? Isn't this ultimately why most things that have anything to do with relationship with another person of any description end up falling apart? Because at some point, someone gets what? Selfish. Someone decides that I want this, I want to feel this, I want to be this, I. Like, that's ultimately the downfall of everything, is that someone wants something else and decides that this is all about serving me. Would that be correct? We love the stories that talk about the opposite, though, don't we? We love hearing the heroic stories where people put their lives on the line for someone else. They make us tingly and they give us goosebumps. How many know who Shania Twain is? Yeah. Some of you cringe at the thought of Shania Twain's music, but most of you, I think all of you know. Like, Shania Twain was a country artist / pop artist when I was a kid. Some of you guys were grown adults, but I was a kid. That was meant to be a joke that you could laugh at, but obviously I've just offended everyone else. So Shania Twain, for some of you may not know her story. Her story is this. When she was 2 or 3 years old, her parents split up and they divorced. And so she moved to be with her mum, and her mum moved away, and eventually over time she met someone else, they got together, and they started doing life together. But life has its turns and its courses that aren't always palatable and enjoyable. And so her mum and her stepmom found themselves in financial turmoil and couldn't afford anything. They did their best, at least as the story goes, to support, to look after, to steward their finances, to provide a life for their kids, but they could just never get money together. And so 8-year-old Shania discovers she's got talent. And so at 8 years old, she starts going out. Her mum takes her to the pubs and the clubs and the country fairs and all that, and she starts singing, getting paid to sing, and the family start getting supported by Shania's income. Her mum would wake her up at all hours of the night in order to allow her to go out and sing and make money. And this continued on until she was 21 and about. In these years, she's actually starting to be recognized. People are starting to realize that she's got talent. And so she's got people knocking on her door wanting to bring her along and equip her and have her come and do things with them. And then at the age of 21, her mum and stepmom are killed in a head-on collision with a logging truck. And life completely spirals in a different direction. By this stage, her mum and stepmom have several other younger children, much younger than her. And she realizes that life for them is going to be very traumatic, very difficult, very hard if she doesn't deliberately step out to do something. So what she decides to do is she puts everything on hold and says, I'm not going to pursue anything until these kids get somewhere. So she decided, I will not pursue success. I will not pursue music. She would continue to go out and perform and sing because that's how she made a living. That's how she got by until these kids, my brothers, my sisters, have got through, not just got into, but got through and graduated school. So it wasn't until, I'm not sure what age she was, but it wasn't until the last one graduated school that she decided to start pursuing a career in music. We like those stories, don't we? Those stories that are just selfless. Someone puts everything on the line. As far as pushes everything aside and says, you know what, I'm just going to serve someone other than myself for once. We like that because it gives us warm goosebumps, but the problem is we like those stories, but I wonder how often we're that people actually outworking that. I think more often, if I'm speaking, not to you, if I'm speaking to myself, to be completely frank, I think I'm more the opposite, that I'm more self-serving than I am putting everything on the line for someone else. Can you put the first slide up, please, Will? Because the purest love is self-sacrificing. That's what the story was. True love aspires to build those around them by serving them. True love aspires to build those around them by serving them. That's what Shania was doing with her kids, with her brothers and sisters. She was wanting to build them, see them become something that they weren't. And that part of that, something that they weren't, was if she didn't do that, they perhaps would never have graduated. So that by serving them in such a way that moves them closer to becoming the person they were created to be. True love aspires to serve people in such a way that moves them closer, thrusts them closer, pushes them closer to becoming the person that they were created to be, not further away from it. A lot of the time, our serving, when it's self-focused serving, we are pushing everyone else further away from what they were created to be, and we're elevating ourselves. You see, love builds something. Love has built several different things that we've looked at through this series, but love builds others. Love builds people, builds other people, builds them up, it elevates them. But that only happens through serving. See, what happens when you're serving yourself is you're doing the opposite. You're trying to build you. So when I'm serving me, I'm trying to build me up. I'm trying to make me better. I'm trying to elevate me. Love, I think, that self-sacrificing love that aspires to build people and thrust people into what it is that God has created them to be, focuses on serving the individual in order for them to become closer to the person they were created to be. That's the story of what Shania was trying to do. We like those stories because we see the love in it. And I think that was the love that we were born to reflect, to radiate, to shine, to demonstrate. I think when we look at Jesus' life and teaching, his teaching doesn't just orchestrate and reveal that aspect of wanting to see people be built up and wanting to serve people, but his lifestyle reflects a lifestyle that deliberately looks to serve people, not be served by them. It looks to serve others rather than serve oneself, because Jesus was all about building other people. Not building himself, not building his empire, not building his inheritance, but building someone else's. That was his focus. That was his desire. That was his direction that he was going. And so I think when we look at the lifestyle, not just the teaching, but the lifestyle of Jesus, that was his sole focus and sole goal. And so this morning we're going to read from John 13 about his, and John was one of Jesus' disciples, one of his 12 disciples, and this is where we're going to read about one of his encounters with Jesus where he's actively doing this. John was a crazy man. If you don't know much about John, he was a little bit wild, a little bit hairy, a little bit Western. At one point, him and Jesus and the other 12, they were going through a Samaritan village, and the Samaritans didn't want them there, so he wanted to burn the village. This guy's crazy. He's a mad dog. So from verse 13, chapter 13, it says this, before the Passover celebration. So this is right before the cross, okay? This is right before the crucifixion. This is that Last Supper that we all know about. Sorry for the yelling. Jesus knew, so Jesus knows something, that his hour had come to leave this world and return to his Father. So to paint that in perspective, he knows that he is about to die. He's not unaware of what's about to happen. He knows that he's about to die. My question to us as we read through this story is, what would you do if you're about to die and you know it? This is your last, perhaps 24 hours on planet Earth. This is going to be your last meal. This is going to be your last time with your friends, with your family, with your car. This is that last moment you have, last breath that you're going to have. What do you do? This is what he does. He had loved his disciples during his ministry on earth, and now he had loved them to the very end. It was time for supper, and the devil had already prompted Judas, son of Simon Iscariot, to betray Jesus. Jesus knew, and so he knows something else, that the Father had given him authority over everything, and that he'd come from God and would return to God. So I find this even more interesting. He knows his hour has come, that he's finished. He is about to be crucified and die. He knows that's coming, but he also knows that he's been given ultimate authority. So I ask the question again, what would you do if you knew that these were your last hours, but you had the authority to do whatever you wanted to in the world? What do you do? I'm pretty sure I'd have a celebration of some description. I'd go out, I'd go hunting. And I may not take anyone with me. I'd go out solo style. I'd go out and do something like I think if we're all real, we'd probably put us, we'd do something that we actually truly love. And perhaps it is spending time with the family. I'd take all the kids and Sage with me hunting deer. That's what I'd do. We can all shoot a deer together. Some of them may not like that, but They may be traumatized, but maybe that's what, like, wouldn't we all probably, if we put ourselves in that position, most of us would do what we wanted to do, wouldn't we? Most of us would do what we want to do rather than what someone else wanted to do. And so he knows that all authority has been given to him and he's about to return to God. Verse 4, so he gets up from the table, took off his robe and wrapped a towel around his waist and poured water into a bowl. We'll hold it here again for a second. So every culture has like table etiquette, don't they? Like here in Western culture and Australian culture, we've got table etiquette and it looks something like this. Everyone goes and washes their hands and comes and sits at the table, unless you're a dirty person. My father tells me I'm a dirty person because sometimes that doesn't happen. So that's why I put that in there. And so we generally, then we sit at the table and what do? Like normally, depending what your family is, that there's a plate with food taken and brought in front of you and you start feasting your face. Or the other alternative is it's a bit more American, but there's bowls of bowls of that stuff, food, put on the table, and then everyone just starts feasting, yeah? Well, they had their own culture. In their own culture, they had dirty feet. Why did they have dirty feet? Because they wore sandals, because it was hot and all of that stuff. And they were walking all day. And so because it was hot and they're walking all day, their sweat would have dripped on their feet and their feet would have been covered in dirt. And they would have been like, no one likes to eat food with smelly feet at the table, do they? Especially when it's your own. It's really bad when it's your own. But no one enjoys that. So what they would do in that culture is that they would sit down and someone would come and wash their feet. And it was always a servant or a slave, and it was never a Jew. A Jewish person would never do that. Never do that. And so this is what, if we go back to that slide, this is what's happening here, that they sit down and Jesus gets up to the table because he's realized no one is washing anyone's feet. And it's customary to wash feet before you eat because that would be the equivalent of us not washing our hands or us not serving guests when they turned up. That hadn't been done. So Jesus, from the end of verse 5, then he began to wash the disciples' feet, drying them with the towel that he had around them. This was a servant's act that no Jew would ever be expected to do, even if it was a slave, would not be expected to do it. Verse 6, when Jesus came to Simon Peter, Peter said to him, Lord, are you going to wash my feet as well? Because the other thing is peers never would consider ever washing one another's feet. That was a no-no. You would not do that. And so then Jesus replied, don't you understand? Or you don't understand what I am doing, but someday you will. Verse 8, no, Peter protested, you will never, ever wash my feet. Jesus replied, unless I wash you, you won't belong to me. You see, serving does something specific. Serving makes someone feel valued, feel respected, feel cared for, feel seen, feel a part of something. When we serve people in love, out of love, it will make someone feel connected to you as an individual. And I know there's spiritual overtones of what Jesus is talking about here, but there's also physical and emotional overtones of what he's communicating as you belong to me by this act of serving. Let's continue, Will. Simon Peter explained, then wash my hands and my head as well, not just my feet. Verse 10 says, Jesus replied, a person who has bathed all over does not need to wash except for the feet to be entirely clean. And you disciples are clean. He's revealing to them, he's saying to them that you are a part of this. He's encouraged them by washing their feet. He's saying that you are a part of this community. He's making them feel encouraged. He's making them feel loved, valued, seen, connected for, cared for. He's not just serving their physical needs as far as dirty feet. He's making their heart, their emotions, their everything feel engaged with. Because serving people serves the whole person. For Jesus knew who would betray him. And you disciples are clean, but not all of you. Verse 11, then Jesus knew who would betray him, for that is what he meant when he said, not all of you are clean. After washing their feet, he put on his robe again and sat down and asked, do you understand what I was doing? You call me teacher and Lord, and you are right, because that is what I am. And since I, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you ought to wash each other's feet. So he's giving them the example of what to do. I have given you this example to follow. Do as I have done to you. This is the example. This is what I want you to do. This is what I want. And it's not just the washing the feet. He's saying, I want you to serve one another. That's the example of what he's giving. I want you to get down low, be humble, and serve. I tell you the truth. Slaves are not greater than the master, nor is the messenger more important than the one who sends it. Now that you know these things, God will bless you for doing them. Verse 33, so we're jumping down a couple of verses. It says this, dear children, this is Jesus still speaking, dear children, to his disciples, to his 12 disciples, I'll be with you only a little longer. And as I told the Jewish leaders, you will search for me, but you can't come where I'm going. He's talking about, I'm about to go to heaven. I'm about to go to be with God. So now I am giving you a new commandment. Love each other, just as I have loved you. You should love each other. Or just as I have loved you, you should love each other. Your love for one another will prove to the world that you are my disciples. Who's he talking to? He's talking to his one another. Who is his one another? His one another, the 12 people sitting with him. And so he's saying to these people that you need to love your one another. The one another here, the one another around you. You need to serve them. And how you serve them elevates them. How you serve them builds them. How you serve them thrusts them closer to becoming the person that they were created to be when we serve our one another. I like it how he's talking to these 12 people. He's not talking to hundreds of people and talking about one another. He's talking to these 12 people and focusing their one another together. Sometimes our one another becomes so broad and big that we actually can't serve anyone. We like the idea of being able to serve the entire world. As far as the world, I'm not talking about globally, but the entire population of human existence around us. It's actually not possible. You're one person. But we've all got one another's built around us. So the question is, like, who is the one another positioned around you? For some of you, part of your one another might be me. For me, part of that one another is you. But perhaps for other of you sitting there, part of your one another has nothing to do with me at all. But it's always got something to do with the person sitting next to us, because the person we're sitting next to, generally, we've got the closest connection with. So for most of us, our one another's are this, the people that we're in fellowship with consistently. It's our husband, it's our wife, it's our children, it's our siblings, it's mum, it's dad, it's our cousins, it's our friends, it's our co-workers. It's these people that we are consistently connecting with, that we're around all the time. They're our one another's that we're supposed to love in such a way that our love serves them, in such a way that it builds them, that it elevates them, that it inspires them, that thrusts them closer to becoming the person that they were created to be rather than further from it. That's ultimately, as a church, we have small groups. We call them links. That's why we have them. Because it's hard. The bigger and the broader the church gets, the harder it is to have those intricate relationships that build, that inspire, that thrust someone into that position, because you actually don't know that person. That's why Jesus is talking about the one another. And I love what takes place is that this one another goes out and encourages other people to become the one another. They go out and they teach and they share and they encourage and they equip other people to become just that. So the question is, who is our one another? For me, it's definitely my wife. For me, it's you guys sitting here. For me, it's my small group. For me, it's the people I get to shoe horses for. They're my one another's that I'm deliberately trying to encourage. I'm trying to serve in such a way that elevates them, that builds them into the person they were created to be. Next slide. Serving people, and I love this thought, serving people isn't solely about meeting people's practical needs. It is about causing them to feel and believe that they are both valued and loved. Serving people isn't solely about meeting people's practical needs. It is about causing them to feel and believe they are both valued and loved. You see, there's two ways of serving people. You can serve just their practical needs. So Jesus washed their feet. It could have just been simply a practical need, but he went far deeper than that, actually served the individual. Caused them to feel valued, caused them to feel connected, served them in such a way that was building them up, that was growing them. See, there's multiple ways that we can serve people. Some people serve just to tick a box. I'm one of those people, if I'm frank, at times. I think we're all one of those people at times, that our serving is just about ticking boxes rather than actually wanting to love that person. I'm just serving because this is what I have to do, this is what I'm being told to do, this is what I think is right. I'm just ticking boxes. We're not actively trying to build anyone. You know what? When we do it in that way, we don't build anything. We won't build anything other than perhaps our own ego and our own selves. In 1944, just after the end of the Second World War, there was a lot of orphans. And so just after the end of the Second World War, one experiment was conducted where obviously there's a lot of orphans needed. And so they gathered 40 infants and they split them up into two rooms. And so the idea was that they were doing experiments on what children need to survive and to feel loved and all the rest. And so in room over here, the nurses and the midwives, they'd go in and they'd feed them. They would clothe them, they would cuddle them, they would caress them, they would talk to them, they would kiss them, they would play with them, they would change them, they would wash them, they'd do everything that you would do if it was your kid. They would care for them. They would actively love them. They'd be there. As soon as they cried, they would be there. They'd do anything they could to make these kids feel loved. And then you had another group over here that they had all their basic fundamental needs met. So the midwives, they would go in and they would feed them. They would change them. That was it. They wouldn't talk to them. They wouldn't cuddle them. They wouldn't comfort them when they were screaming. They wouldn't make them feel loved. They wouldn't stroke them. They wouldn't do anything. They just met their physical needs. And so you got group over here. This is a true story. You can look it up if you want. Group over here getting all their emotional, all their every needs met. And this group over here is just getting their basic physical, practical needs met. After 4 months, they end up having to shut the study down because 10 of the 20 from this group had died. There was nothing wrong with the kids. They didn't get sick or anything. Well, they end up getting sick enough to die. But not one of the kids over here died. And then after even completing the study and moving these kids over into this group of children, there was still another 3 or 4 died. The truth is this: we can serve people in such a way that we're meeting every practical need that they have, but actually not build anything. That we actually aid in the death of something. We think we're serving, but we're ticking boxes. That's all we're doing. We're aiding in the death of something. We're not building anything. Some of us serve our spouses that way. We think we're serving them, but all we're doing is ticking boxes. Some of us serve our bosses that way. We think we're serving something, but all we're doing is ticking boxes. Some of us serve our kids that way. Some of us serve each other that way. Some of us serve the church that way. Some of us serve in ways that all we're doing is ticking boxes. We're not actively seeing anything built, anything enlarged, anything grown. All we're doing is ticking boxes, and it's aiding in the death of something. It's not doing anything. It's not serving out of love. It's not building something. It's just ticking boxes. Then other of us perhaps do the exact same things, but it's a heart behind it that's getting felt. It's a heart behind it that's coming through, that's seeping through. And it might be a long, grueling process. For anyone that's a parent, understands that loving, growing, and serving kids, because parents serve kids, don't they? You wait hand and foot on your kids. It's a long, grueling process. When done in love, for those parents that are older and have seen the outworking of that, you build something. You've built something through your serving of them. Don't we? Imagine a world. Imagine a community around us that the way that you serve, the way that we serve our family transforms them. The way that we serve our community transforms them. The way that we serve our bosses transforms the workplace. Imagine that. It's actually relatively, I tried to do this. It's actually quite hard to do it because I don't think we see it overly often. This self-sacrificing, self-serving love that just wants to serve another person or other people in order to see them become established, come or move further and closer to the person that God created them to be, with absolutely no benefit for them at all. We don't see it all that often, but can you imagine what could take place? I actually think that we do see it through the pages of history. We just ignore it. We just ignore it. So after the death of Jesus, there was 120 people, about approximately 50 days after the death of Jesus, there's approximately 120 people sitting in an upstairs room. It was like a Christian festival, perhaps. I don't know what was necessarily going on there. There would have been a lot of dialogue. They were convinced of the resurrection of Jesus. That is a guarantee that every person, all 120 in that upper room, in that upstairs apartment building, were convinced of the resurrection of Jesus that had taken place. But I bet they're all sitting there panicking that what had just happened to Jesus was going to happen to them. They were terrified. And then the strangest thing took place one day, that they started speaking in another language. You can read about this. If you don't know what I'm talking about, you can read about it in Acts 2, one of the books of the Bible. You can read about this story. They all started speaking in another language, and they went out in the streets speaking in another language. And then the different people in the streets were from different cultures and backgrounds and had different languages, and every person heard all these people speaking different languages, and they understood them. And so at that point in time, there was 3,000 people who decided that I want to believe in this resurrected Jesus. Then we read shortly after that, not long after that, we're not going into years after that, very short period after time, there was another 2,000 added to it. And so it's growing, this belief, this lifestyle, this what Jesus taught the disciples, love one another in such a way that will prove to the world that you are my disciples. Serve one another in such a way that builds people, was starting to grow legs. But what I find fascinating is this. If we go to the next slide. I've run past that. Keep going. What I find fascinating is this. In 30 AD, it all starts. Jesus is crucified. In 36 AD, this is the first martyr we ultimately see in the Christian faith. Stephen is stoned to death. You can read about that in the book of Acts. So he was stoned to death. But it keeps going on. But the church is growing. And I believe the church is growing, and through this period, the church is growing. I believe it's growing for this reason. The people were experiencing love. The people were experiencing a love that was transforming. The people were actually feeling valued by how they were loved, by how they were served. They were feeling loved, connected with. That they were becoming built into the person that God had created them to be, because people were loving one another in a way that builds people. How they were serving them was building people. It was self-sacrificing. So in 49 AD, because of the rapid expansion of Christianity, Emperor Claudius expels all Jews from Rome because they just associated Jews and Christians as the same. So everyone lost their homes. Everyone's gone. Then in 54 AD, another of the disciples is crucified. Philip is crucified. So he's murdered, he's martyred. In 61 AD, Paul is imprisoned. It's not looking good, is it? These are the founding people of the Christian faith. And this is a mere 30 years after the death of Jesus. But you haven't even got time for fairy tales to exist. It's not long enough because people that experienced the resurrection are still alive. The founding fathers of the Christian faith, aside from Jesus, are still alive. The apostles that walked with Jesus are still alive at this place. And these are the guys that are leading and heading up the church. And these are the people that are teaching the believers. And the numbers of believers are growing. But these guys are dying. In 64 AD, Peter is crucified. The one that Jesus said, on this rock I'll build my church. In 64 AD, the Emperor Nero burns the city of Rome and then says the Christians did it, and then there's mass persecutions of the Christians. What do those persecutions look like? Well, one way that they were persecuted was this, that the Christians would be thrown into a bag with snakes, scorpions, cats, and all sorts of things and thrown into a water source. They're skinned alive. We're literally talking about persecution. And so that is happening across a large range of people, that this persecution is taking. But still the church is growing. In 67 AD, Paul is beheaded. The one that wrote the majority of the epistles in the New Testament. He's beheaded. By 75, by AD 75, 11 of the 12 disciples are dead. And I say 11 of the 12 because the guy that wrote this book, they tried to kill, but they couldn't kill. He didn't die until, depending on what scholar, what historian you read, it's between 90 and 100 AD. So by 75, you can put that slide down. All the disciples, all the founding fathers, the 11 out of the 12 are dead. They've been martyred. They've been killed. But Christianity is still growing. It actually doesn't for me, make much sense. Why would you get into something that you're seeing everyone die? They're actually engaging in something that we hear about people being beheaded overseas, don't we? As far as Christians being headed overseas, and people of other religions as well, not just Christians. But we're very separated and removed from that. So we don't know that person, but these people knew these people. But Christianity's growing. We can go to the next slide. 12 men who Jesus had this conversation with, the conversation that we've read about serving people, loving people, building people, how we're serving, literally changed the communities around them, and at the same time started something that would eventually have an impact on the world globally. Continue. Next slide. Their love for one another, this love for one another that Jesus encouraged them with, that engaged them in, so transformed people that even the lure of death couldn't persuade them. It so transformed individuals that the lure of death, that the threat of death, it should probably say, couldn't persuade them from pursuing a relationship with Jesus. What would happen if we were to love the people around us the way that Jesus instructed his original followers to? What would happen, you can drop that slide, if our love was self-sacrificing? If our love, if how we served our one another was all about seeing that person, those people built to becoming the person they were created to be, with no strings attached. It had no benefit on us, it just had benefit on them. What would it look like? What would our families look like? As far as, think of your family, think of your children if you've got children, or your spouse if you've got spouse. If you haven't, just your extended family. If you haven't got that, you've got friends. Think of them. What would those relationships look like? What would those individuals look like if we loved like that? If we served like that built people? If our sole goal was to build people in such a way that they became closer to the person they were created to be rather than further from us, what would our kids look like at the end? What would our children look like once they're grown up if we served them that way? What could change in our work environments? With our bosses, with our co-workers, what could change there? What could change in our small groups? As far as inside the church here, what could change in that? But what could change in the broader community if we, as a lot more than 12 sitting here, decided to love like that? Decided to build people by how we serve, because love has a focus on building people. I like the thought, I like the idea of 12 people could love in such a way that story of how to love one another so transformed other people that end up transforming individuals and people, and then thrust out into the global world and touch people's lives. Yep, I know that we can read through the pages of history and see bad things that Christianity has done, but it doesn't take much of a Google search. It doesn't take much of a history study. It doesn't take much of any study at all to see the incredible things that far outweigh the negative, that the spread of Christianity, the spread of love of Jesus, spread of loving one another has had an impact in the world. I wonder if we were to vision forward 10 years, 20 years from now, what this community would look like if we made a deliberate decision tomorrow to get up in the morning and love with no strings attached, to serve with no strings attached, to serve in such a way that builds people, not ticks boxes. Can you stand up with me, please? Let me pray. Father, I thank you for this message that a few you've placed on my heart, Father, and that you've challenged me with. I pray that all of us, God, regardless of where we're at, whether we have believed in Jesus for a minute or if we believed in him all our lives, that we can take up the challenge, take up the thought of deliberately stepping out and loving people in such a way that serves them, in such a way that sees them built closer to becoming the person that they were created to be by you, Father. I pray that we're deliberate, Jesus, like we talked about last week, in discovering people. And that in our interactions with the one another's around us, Father, that we seek to discover what it is that you've placed, that you've planted inside them, Jesus, and we serve them in such a way that we see that drawn out of them, Father. And I pray that as we do that, as we step into that, God, that we see our children's lives transformed, that we see the relationships that we have with our spouses or our co-workers or our friends or our family. We see those individuals transformed into closer becoming the person that you created them to be as we seek to serve them in such a way that draws out everything that you've created them to become. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. If you want prayer for anything, I'd love to have the opportunity to pray with you. If you want to chat about anything, I'd love to have the opportunity to engage with you, connect with you, talk with you. Otherwise, head out, have a tea or coffee, and encourage one another. Be deliberate in serving one another. But the other thing, can I ask you to be really deliberate with? Head up the back and see Chris when you can help out for the tin rattle. Ron Delidio, he is going to be several months recovering from a 5-way heart bypass surgery. It just happened on Thursday. So he normally heads up, he normally mans it, he normally runs it, he normally does about the work of equivalent of 3 people at that thing. He will not be there. So can I ask, can I encourage, can I have all hands on deck for that? So whenever you can do it, we'll be doing it on the Saturday and the Monday, Queen's birthday weekend. Head up, see Chris, put your name down. Otherwise, see you next week. Love you, church.